We're going to start the plenary in a minute or two, so if everyone could take a seat.
Thank you. Can I just do a sound test? Can you all hear me at home? On Zoom? Yes, hands are up. Thank you. Very nice to welcome everybody in the room and everybody on Zoom and from wherever you are. Thank you so much for spending your time coming to see us today. And it's really nice to see a full room of people. I think we've just done, for those in the room, some housekeeping. And can I just make a reminder about conduct? You are all responsible for your own conduct, so please think very carefully about things that you say and you are responsible for. So just a quick reminder. Moving on to the minutes, I've just been told that there was an email, but it wasn't sent to me. It was sent to an old address from Jerry that has some sort of amendment to the minutes. So I'll have to pick up on that later, because I haven't had a chance to read what the amendment was, because I don't receive emails from my Vice President's address. So we'll come back to you on that. I'm not aware of any other amendments, but it might be helpful if Jerry could see the chair of the Constitution Committee, just to see what the amendment to the minutes is, and then I'll come back to that for that item. Thank you. I'm sorry, can we not have anyone from the back of the room? I personally have not received the email until just now. Please, if we have anyone, please. It's very important how we all speak to each other. We haven't got yet onto any contentious issues. And I'm getting started. Let's also be on our best behaviour. We have some very important guests with us today. We have Nick Price to my left, who's going to speak to us. He's head of the Special Counter Crime and Terrorism Division at the Criminal Prosecution Service. And we also want to thank his colleague over there, Louis Pope, Inclusion and Community Engagement Manager. Just a bit about Nick. He's previously led the International Justice and Organised Crime Division, and before the CPS, Proceeds of Crime, managing a team of 150 staff tasked with restraining and confiscating criminal assets. He joined the CPS from the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is the body responsible for investigating miscarriage of justice. He's been involved with a number of very complex and high-profile cases, and Nick was called to the bar by Middle Temple in 1998. So I'm sure I've missed out an awful lot of Nick's bio. Nick's here because the community have had a great deal of concern about why cases are not prosecuted. What is the reason for that? Particularly, there was concern about the hate convoy that came down the Finchley Road, and that's caused a lot of distress to people in the community. So we've been having a number of meetings, and I'm very grateful for Nick and Louis coming to talk to us very early on a Sunday morning. So I shall hand you over to Nick. Thank you.
Well, firstly, can I start by thanking you for that introduction? Right. Can you hear me? Right, I'll put it right here. Can I thank you for inviting us to come and speak to you this morning? I wanted to start just by setting out some basics around the criminal justice system and some basics around my division. My division, as you've heard, is Special Crime and Counter-Terrorist Division. We are a national team. We deal with the most serious cases, obviously, cases of terrorism, but the most serious public order offences, stirring up racial hatred offences. But we are a national casework division, so we do that top flight work. We also have CPS areas, so there is a CPS London. They will do the lower level work, magistrates court work and Crown Court work. So we work together and the work is sort of divided in that sense. Just some basics about how we operate. I think the first thing I'd like to get over is that we are a wholly independent prosecuting authority. We're not told what to do by the government. We're not told what to do, frankly, by anybody. We're governed by our code for Crown prosecutors. That code sets out how we approach evidence in criminal cases, how we make our decisions evidentially in criminal cases, and how we apply the public interest. So our decisions are made based on a two-stage test. Firstly, there must be enough evidence for us to bring the case to court with a realistic prospect of conviction. So that's the first test. If a case doesn't meet that test, if a case is evidentially insufficient, that is the end of it. The public interest is applied where there is sufficient evidence. Now, I can say today, in any case that involves anti-Semitism or hate crime, if the evidential test is met, it is almost inevitable, not inevitable, but almost inevitable that the public interest will be met as well. Obviously, we understand anti-Semitism. We understand the role we play in the community in terms of preventing hate crime and prosecuting those who conduct that work or conduct those offences. So from a public interest perspective, there really ought not to be any controversy in terms of how we approach our cases. However, evidentially, the test we apply is a strict test, and I think sometimes it's difficult to get over to people that however heinous a crime may be, and however disgusted the community are about it, if there isn't sufficient evidence, we cannot take the case to court. Now, no doubt there'll be some questions about that, which I'll deal with if and when they're asked. Believe it or not, there are Jewish prosecutors in the Crown Prosecution Service. Shouldn't really be surprised by that. We have an internal Jewish network. It's an active network. So I say that because I want the community to understand that we are not on the outside trying to look in. This anti-Semitism and our approach to anti-Semitism and our approach to engaging with the community is, of course, informed by our casework, but it's also informed by our own people. And I think that's a really important message to get across. So I wanted to move on and give you just some sort of facts and figures, and just to talk about a couple of cases, just really as examples of the work that my division does. I know that there will be questions, so I'm not going to hopefully not talk for that long. I'd like to give as much opportunity for people to ask me whatever they want to ask me. So if it feels like I'm rattling through this a bit, I am, because I want to just sort of get through this and then give you an opportunity to speak to me. So anti-Semitism rears its head, as you know better than anybody, across a range of different offending. In my division, it is, and the work we do, it is principally far-right extremism. There is a pretty strong thread through all far-right extremist activity, a pretty strong anti-Semitic thread. And so it raises its head there. It also raises its head in the more serious public order offences, the stirring up offences that we deal with. Just for some basic statistics, we actually have a really strong record of securing convictions and getting some really decent sentences for some of the customers that we deal with. Looking at terrorism generally across all of our work, our conviction rate for all of our terrorist offences for the year ending September 22 was 88%. That's actually a really high conviction rate. Looking at our records from between 2021 and 2022, all of our stirring up hatred cases, and some of those obviously included expressions of anti-Semitism, all of the cases that proceeded to court resulted in a conviction. Now, I think that's important because you'll remember what I was saying a moment ago about the tests we apply. I think that demonstrates that broadly we are getting that right, and the cases that are going to court, the cases that are meeting the Code for Crown Prosecutors, we are securing convictions, and as I say, getting some really, really good sentences. Let me move on just to a couple of examples of cases that we've recently dealt with. And you may have heard about some of these cases, but I think they're instructive. In November 22, Daniel Harris was tried and convicted of encouraging terrorism. That's Section 1 Terrorist Act offence and also a Section 57 Terrorist Act offence. This was an online offender. He'd posted videos, he'd expressed and repeated violent anti-Semitic, racist, misogynist, and homophobic views. And so, you know, a thoroughly pleasant character. In relation to his anti-Semitic views, he promoted the idea that Jews, non-whites, and those he viewed as degenerate should be subjected to violence, should be killed. He glorified mass murder. As I say, a thoroughly pleasant individual. We convicted him. He was sentenced in January this year and received a sentence of 11.5 years. So that was one of the cases we've recently dealt with. Another one, Stuart Sutton. He was charged with 5 offences under the Public Order Act. He came to the attention of the police after intelligence had been received that he had been posting anti-Semitic and other racist content on social media over quite a long period in 2021. He published and distributed material on various accounts that was threatening, abusive, insultive, anti-Semitic. Used words like "the world is run by Jews," which is something that we see quite often in these sorts of offenders. In December, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. We convicted him. That was following a guilty plea. And moving on to one final example that I'll talk about, Matthew Hennigan. This was, again, another anti-Semite. He was handing out anti-Semitic leaflets and posting them through people's letterboxes. an amalgamation of conspiracy theories about terrorist attacks, anti-Semitism, and so on. The leaflets that he was handing out and publishing were actually pretty disgusting. I won't go into all of it now. He was convicted in March 2022 and received a custodial sentence of 12 years. Now, all of this will have been out in the media, so you may well have heard it already. But I wanted to start just by setting out, from our perspective, from a serious counter-terrorist and serious public order perspective, we actually do a really good job. And where there is sufficient evidence, we get the cases into court, we get convictions, and these people get long sentences. Now, I am not for a moment trying to suggest to you that the criminal justice system is going to solve anti-Semitism. It simply isn't, and it isn't designed to. But we do play a critical part in the broader criminal justice system and the broader community in terms of actually bringing these people to justice and getting the sentences that I've just described. So I think that's all I wanted to start with, just to give a bit of a flavour of what we do and how we do it. I'm really conscious of time, and I'm conscious people will have questions, so I will shut up at that point and hand over.
Thank you. So we've got about 15 minutes to ask questions. So if you want to ask a question, there's already some gone up online. There'll be some in the room. If you are in the room and you're asked, I'll deal with who asked the questions, obviously. Could you come to the microphone and remember to give your name and your constituency? So I'm going to start online this time. Andrew Gilbert, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, President. Andrew Gilbert, Reform Judaism. I'm also very involved with the CPI and the Metropolitan Police on behalf of London Jewish Forum, and work very closely with the board. On the convoys, there was you initially said that 2 of the people in the car were let off, and then finally said there was just not enough evidence to go ahead with the convoy prosecutions. That meets your criteria of not enough evidence. However, we know that and everyone knows that amongst those 4, there were all these chants being made that were anti-Semitic. How is this just a police issue? How do you advise the police? Is there a way in which the CPS goes back to the police? It can't be enough for us as a community to see the whole convoy charges totally reduced and us feeling that we've been let down in this way. How could this have been avoided?
Thank you for that question, Andrew. It's a simple question, but it's quite a complex answer. Firstly, you're absolutely right. In that case, there was not enough evidence to bring it. No one would have been more delighted to get that case into court than me. That's why we do the job we do. That's my day job. I would love to have prosecuted that case. Unfortunately, we could not positively identify the people in the cars. So we couldn't say and prove to the criminal standard that the people in the cars were the people that were issuing the anti-Semitic comments. That was a pretty fundamental evidential issue, and we couldn't get beyond it. How do we deal with that? Well, in every case that we have a debrief with the police. So we will go back over a case when it's ended, whether that's a successful conclusion or an unsuccessful conclusion. And we will walk through learning points, and there are always learning points. But in the end, what we can't do is create evidence. We can only work with the evidence that we get. Now, I'm speculating now, but if there were other people in the community that may have seen something, if they'd come forward, it might have been a different story. But neither the CPS nor the police can create evidence. We can gather it, we can present it to a court, and we can get convictions. But if the evidence isn't there, and in that case, Andrew, it wasn't there in the end, then it doesn't meet our test, and we can't get the case into court. We tried as hard as we could on that case, and if I'm honest, we probably tried too hard, which is why I think the community was very disappointed that having begun a prosecution, we ended it. But I've looked at that case from one end to the other. There simply isn't enough evidence to get that case into court. And as I say, we can't generate evidence. We rely on witnesses, the community, so on and so forth. So I'm not sure, Andrew, whether that answers your question fully.
We'll move on to, can a couple of people come to the microphone in the room so we can save time? I'll call someone from the room and then online, but it would be good if you could be at the microphone. And can the clock go on, please, after the Nick Price? Fine, thank you.
This is Keith Myers, Edge United. Hello, Nick. This is more of a statement of a question because I need to declare an interest in that I was actually joint chair of the CPS Jewish Network, and I worked with Nick when I was in HR. I've taken an interest in CPS's handling of anti-Semitism for some time, approaching both the DPP and the policy leads on how cases are handled and how community engagement could be improved. Apart from the evidentiary test and the public interest test, there's one extra thing that Nick didn't mention, which was news to me, which is anti-Semitism is not a crime. In order for prosecutions to take place, the racism usually has to be an aggravating factor. So Abdullah Qureshi was convicted of assault. The fact that all his victims were Jewish was the racially aggravating factor. The anti-Semitism itself wasn't the crime. In the more serious cases that Nick is mentioning, stirring up race hatred, this is a particular case where the CPS lawyers can't charge the case. It has to get the, if I'm right, the Attorney General's approval in order for those cases to be approved. Nearly finished. If you want to know more about what the CPS is doing, you can go onto the website, sign up to their newsletter, choose the area of work that you're interested in. And the final thing is that while we are seeking justice, Sedek Teodov, what the only thing that the CPS can deliver is the law, and which by its nature is not necessarily the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to report, we have 6 people online, 3 at the microphone. So unless the questions are quicker, I'm not going to, with the best will in the world, be able to get to everybody. So I just want to go online to people that don't speak as frequently. Glynis Kuzak, could you please ask your question? If you could be as concise as possible, more questions can be asked.
Yes, I can be very quick. It's all very well getting these people into prison, prosecutions, but what happens once they're in prison? Does the CPS have any influence on rehabilitation so that when these people come out, they don't start all over again? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Glynis. We do not have a role in that. Our role is, to prosecute and convict people. Once somebody goes into prison, there is work done in prison, but that's the responsibility of the prison service. But anti-Semitism has been around a long time, and you'll recall I said a moment ago, we can put people in jail, but the criminal justice system alone is not going to solve anti-Semitism, and I think we need to be realistic about that.
Thank you. Richard.
Richard Sassoon from the S&P Sephardi community. Firstly, thank you for the work that you do for the country as a whole. My question is this: the examples that you gave were all of far-right extremists.
Yeah.
What proportion of your work covers far-right extremists, and what proportion of your work covers extremists from other, whether they be Islamist or left-wing or foreign?
Really quick answer to that, it's about 50-50. The really worrying part is that far-right extremism is growing. We're seeing more of it. We're seeing more of it online. And I think incredibly worryingly, we're seeing much younger people getting involved in far-right extremism, whether they're radicalized or not online. We're dealing now with 13, 14, 15-year-olds. I think that's really, really concerning. And far-right extremism is a growth industry, generally committed online, and it's international. So I'm sorry, that's a bit depressing, but that's the answer.
Very depressing. Thank you. Keith Appleby, online, please. Please state your constituency. Right, we're frozen. Sorry, I'll try and come back to you. Larry. Oh, okay, go on. We can. We can't see you. You might want to turn off your video so we can hear you properly.
Am I up?
Oh, we can now. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Very briefly, you've mentioned the far right. You've mentioned the Islamists. What you haven't mentioned is the far left and anybody in the Labour Party. Could you expand on that, please?
Well, I'm not a politician. And as I said, when I started, we're an independent prosecuting authority. We do not have any political bias. That would be wholly wrong. All I will say in answer to that is if people from any persuasion commit offences and there's sufficient evidence, we will prosecute them. I'm not sure whether we've prosecuted anybody from the Labour Party recently, so I can't give you a direct answer to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Deborah Cohen.
Thank you. Deborah Cohen, Belsize Square Synagogue. Two very quick questions. You gave the statistic of your conviction rates. What's the statistic of the percentage of referrals you get that you actually pick up and take on? And I'm asking you that in the context of referrals from the world of safeguarding adults, crimes against adults, where the take-up rate by the CPS is minimal. And secondly, can you say something quickly about the government's proposals to update the prevent strategy and whether that will make any difference?
Just dealing with the second question first, I can't comment on behalf of the government in relation to prevent. We are involved in it to a very limited extent, but it is a political issue. And as I've said, I'm not a politician. It'd be wholly wrong of me to comment on that. When you ask about referral rates, it's quite a complex area. There isn't a single method in which referrals are made to us. We spend a lot of time providing what's called early investigative advice to the police as they are investigating cases. In the more serious cases, that's quite often. In serious cases, we provide early investigative advice. The majority of cases in which we are involved early end up, because often, as I say, we're advising on those cases from an early stage, they will end up being a prosecution. It isn't possible to give a percentage because cases are referred in a whole, range of different ways. What I will say is, certainly from a terrorism perspective and the most, serious case perspective, if a case is referred to us, generally, we will get that case into court, subject, of course, to the evidential tests that I outlined earlier.
Thank you. Larry Ray, please.
Muted. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanet and District Reform Synagogue. Clearly, there's dissatisfaction in our community at the ability to achieve successful prosecutions. And I think the question that previously asked on rates is extremely important. I mean, I've worked on hate crime issues with the police and with other agencies. And, collecting evidence requires resources, and it requires the ability of the police to devote time to collecting evidence. Surely one of the major issues here is resource and underfunding of the police and criminal justice process for over 13 years or so. If we put this in a wider context, only a tiny proportion of rape allegations ever get to trial. If you're burgled, it's very unlikely the police are even going to be able to investigate. And the dissatisfaction in our community, I think, is part of a much wider dissatisfaction with the ability of the criminal justice process to offer protection. Yet, how important, in your view, is the issue of underfunding? Thank you.
Again, it's a complex issue. I can't answer for the police. It would be wholly wrong of me to do that. What I can say is my division, the people that do these serious cases, we are well resourced. There are no resourcing issues in my team. More broadly, the criminal justice system, there are problems that are well documented. There is a significant backlog of Crown Court cases following the pandemic. Because, of course, during the pandemic, it was very difficult to get trials off the ground because that process is still today face-to-face, relies on people coming to court and giving evidence. There is a big backlog. There is some investment going into that. Again, I think that's probably for the politicians. I think a politician really needs to answer for how much resource is being put into the criminal justice system. But, you know, in serious cases, the cases we deal with, actually, we're able to get those cases into court and we're able to get them tried and concluded in a reasonable amount of time. I can't say that for the whole criminal justice system, but these sorts of cases do get prioritised. But, you know, the policing question is really a question for the Home Secretary and individual chief constables in terms of how they choose to harvest their resource and apply that resource. But there are no resourcing issues from my perspective in my division.
Thank you. After Colin's question, I'm going to only take questions online because there's a far greater number of people online, and I think it's fairer, and we'll get through as many as we can. Colin.
Colin Grayson, Leeds Jewish Representative Council. I followed the convoy case in the press. I don't suggest I have any great information more than that. So can I ask you some questions to fill in some gaps, please?
Of course.
First of all, is the identity of the people who were in the cars known? Secondly, is the issue then that their identity is known, but that it's not possible to say that even though they were in the cars, they weren't actually saying anything, and that some third party was saying something who was not in the car or cars? And thirdly, is there any documentation available that CPS have published so that those of us who care about the detail, the precise reason why there wasn't enough evidence, is available, which you might not want to put in the public domain at a meeting like this? I would like to know, in short, why, in detail, why that happened. Fourthly, did the police actually stop these people and confirm their identity, or was it just registration numbers, etc., that led to their identity being found?
Firstly, there's a limit to what we can put into the public domain because the case wasn't prosecuted, and you'll understand that's where we are. The identification issue in that case was that the people arrested, we have to prove they were the same people issuing the comments from the car at the relevant time, and we were not able to do that because the evidence of what took place in the moment at the time was insufficient to deal with identification. And identification is a really critical feature of criminal justice and prosecuting cases. We have to be able to prove that an individual who we say it is has actually committed the offence, and we simply couldn't do it in that case.
So can I just follow that?
Of course.
The identity of the people was known. It wasn't a lack of knowledge of their identity. It was whether or not they'd actually committed an offence.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
And I think, to be fair, blame for this also has to be with the Metropolitan Police, because the CPS can only prosecute the evidence they've got. So if the Metropolitan Police had interviewed people, stopped people straight away, then critical evidence that would have been time sensitive would have been available to the CPS. I know you haven't wanted to mention the police, but you do need police evidence. Right, I'm going to take the questions online. I'm now going to get to the order that they're in. I'm not going to get to everybody because, and you're being very good-natured taking questions. Thank you. There are simply too many people with hands up. Susan Pascoe.
Susan Pascoe, Israel Community. Thanks so much for speaking to us today. I wanted to pick up on the points you mentioned in relation to public order offences and stirring racial hatred, and particularly the threatening protests, such as the one that took place just under 2 weeks ago at UCL, when the UCL Israel Society hosted the speaker Yosef Haddad. The menacing chants outside called for intifada and revolution, yet the police allowed them to continue, and there seemed to be no follow-up consequences. This obviously allows Jew hatred to fester, leads to extremism. So I wanted to ask, what can be done better to manage such unruly protests, which do incite racial hatred and seem to be public order offences? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. It's really a difficult question for me to answer because as CPS prosecutors, we're not investigators. That is a role for the police, and I'm not aware of the particular circumstances that you've just outlined. So it's very difficult for me to comment on that, other than to say that where the police bring a case to us, we will work as hard as we can to ensure that, you know, there is sufficient evidence and we can get the case into court. But I'm afraid that's really more a question for the police.
Thank you. Rick Cooper.
Hello, Richard Cooper, Portsmouth and South Sea Hebrew Congregation. Thank you, Nick, and your colleagues for looking after us as you always have done. In October 2018, two friends of mine, women in their 50s, were protesting loudly but peacefully outside an anti-Israel Islamist meeting. My friends were not using hate speech or insightful language. They were attacked by two or more young women physically, assaulted quite badly, and one of my friends, the older one, was actually knocked to the ground and hit her head on a curb and had to be taken to hospital for an overnight stay for concussion. The photograph of at least one of the young female assailants was made available on social media. The police did not pursue with any prosecution. And my question is, have you any knowledge of this case? And can you give me any more information, please, as to why it was not pursued to prosecution, and how in similar cases we could perhaps get better evidence or do something better to enable such cases to be prosecuted and successfully prosecuted? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I'm afraid my answer is going to be quite similar to a couple of the answers I've given. The CPS does not investigate. We're not investigative prosecutors. Investigations are for the police, and if you feel that the police have not properly conducted an investigation, it's a matter that needs to be raised forcefully with the police. I'm not aware of that particular case, but again, you know, if a case is not investigated, it will never it will never darken the doors of the CPS, because we take referrals from the police, but we're not investigators. How you improve that, I think, is about your relationship with the police and your local police. But again, I can't answer for them, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I'm going to have to come to the last question. I'm really sorry, everybody online. I'm going to let George White ask his question, and if others want to come for the President's statement, you're welcome. So I do apologise. George.
Thank you very much. I've got a very simple question. From your experience, what are the lessons learned that we should take away and try and improve to help you increase the number of prosecutions that you actually carry out? I recognise you've got to help the police as well, but you talk about evidence. What lessons can we learn about getting better evidence and helping the police so these things can get to your department so you can prosecute them?
Yeah. I have to be really careful here, because I don't want to give the impression that I'm sort of blaming the community, because I'm absolutely not. But it's all about the quality of evidence, and it's about people's preparedness to actually sign a witness statement, come forward and tell us and tell the court what has taken place. I know there are huge challenges around that, and I know that, you know, that's something we want to have a dialogue with the community about. But in the end, our cases are only as good as the evidence that we can present in court, and not exclusively, but generally that means people coming to court to explain what has happened, what they've seen, what they've experienced. Now, again, I'm not blaming the Jewish community or suggesting that the Jewish community doesn't do that. It's an issue for everybody. Nobody really wants to come to a Crown Court, stand in a box and give evidence and be cross-examined. It's not a pleasant process, but that is the process, and that's how we get cases home, and that's how we get people into jail who rightfully should be in jail. So I think that's probably the main thing, the community being prepared to stand up, be counted, give evidence, obviously where they've witnessed events, and that puts us in a much stronger position.
Thank you. So evidence is key. We're going to apologise. We're going to have a very brief thank you from Amanda, but we are all grateful that you've answered so many questions. Amanda.
Nick, thank you so much for giving up some of your Sunday to us deputies today. And we can't thank you enough for being so candid and being so open with us as you have been today and taking the questions that you have. We thank you enormously for all you do and all the work of your colleagues. You've been really clear about the difference between what the CPS does and what the police does, and I think that's been really helpful for all of us as deputies. What I would say to deputies is, as you know, Nick, I sit on the external consultative group, which the CPS has along with the CST and others. So if deputies have any other questions, please do pass those questions to me. I have regular meetings with some of Nick's colleagues and I can pick them up with them then. Many thanks.
And thank you as well. It was very good of you, both of you, to come. It's very much appreciated. Let's have a clap. Thank you. You're very welcome to stay. Please. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. Engagement is what it's all about, isn't it? I think it's very important that we have these talks, we have an ability for dialogue, and that we're very fortunate that people in key positions are happy to come and talk to us on a Sunday morning and to answer questions. Thank you. So, thank you. It's something nice today for the President's statement to start. Can we all wish David Mendoza-Wolfson a happy birthday? What a lovely birthday for him. I can't think of anything nicer than to start your birthday with a meeting. Isn't that lovely? So we hope you'll have a very peaceful time with the International Division questions today. Some other Mazel Tovs. Richard Del Monte on the birth of granddaughter, Sid Rutstein on the bat mitzvah of his granddaughter, Ella Marks, who received her MBE at an investiture ceremony this week. That's wonderful news. And to Emma Brand on the wedding of her sister Hayley. So it's good to have Mazel Tovs, but unfortunately, a very, very, very sad condolence to Rabbis Jonathan and Sybil Remain on the tragic loss of their son, Benedict, who was on honeymoon. That is one of the most tragic things that I have heard. Our heartfelt sympathies go to them and to all the family. Before we start, I want to also tell you something very positive and historic. During the week, for about 36 hours, I had a very long journey to Abu Dhabi, but it was absolutely worth it. It was the most incredible experience to go to celebrate the inauguration of the Abrahamic family house. So there was a beautiful synagogue designed by David Abigi, who has designed the Holocaust Memorial. There was a mosque and a church. It was the most fantastic experience under the sky to have so many people gathered there in peace and in love. And I have to give credit to His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa Al Mubarak, President of the Abrahamic Family House, who gave us all such a fantastic welcome. And it's amazing to see peace that is in the region, the welcome that is given. And I think this is the first synagogue that's been inaugurated in 100 years. So I think that is such a positive. It's the way forward. And it was very, very proud to be able to represent the board. And the chief rabbi was there with his team, and also Michael Goldstein, president of United Synagogue. So it really was the most amazing experience. Coming on to the president's statement, I'll take questions because I've eaten straight a bit into my time, so I could speak a bit longer. So we'll take questions online. Right, I'll take, and then in the room. The clock will be on, please, for 2 minutes, if you can put on the clock. Louise Ellman, you were first.
Yes. Madam President. Louise Ellman, Jewish Labour Movement. I'd like to congratulate you, President, on your speech at the Labour Party event that marked the end of the Equality and Human Rights Commission's special measures on the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. I thought you caught the spirit of the moment very well indeed. And I too felt very pleased to be at that event. I felt some satisfaction. But I will never ever forget the shame of the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn and the speed at which anti-Semitism grew from people who considered themselves to be anti-racist. And looking back on that period, I think that the Jewish community should feel very proud, and in particular, there should be a lot of pride on the way in which the board acted together with other mainstream Jewish organisations in dealing with that issue. I think it was very, very important how that was handled, and it was very, very effective. But Keir Starmer at that meeting made it clear that Jeremy Corbyn would not be able to stand ever again as a Labour Party candidate, a very welcome statement. And he also made it very clear that he doesn't see this as the end of the road, just as a very important stopping place where those special measures have gone. And I'd like to ask you, Madam President, could you tell us how you and the board are now going to continue to be involved with the Labour Party in dealing with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? We've reached a very important point, a very great success this week, but the job is not yet done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Louise. It was absolutely the right thing to do to make that speech, and I was asked by the Labour Party to do this. I stressed in the speech that I'm not a member of a political party and it's not an endorsement, but credit where credit is due. The leadership of the Labour Party had worked extremely hard to deal with anti-Semitism, and for several years I have sat on the Labour Party Anti-Semitism Advisory Board. But as I said, a note of caution. This is a journey. The journey, as Louise has said, has not ended, particularly at local level. There's toxicity. There are still MPs. There are still councillors. I'm afraid it's going to be difficult to say that anti-Semitism will be gone. It flourishes, unfortunately, throughout society. The board will carry on as it has before. We will have engagement. We will call out people that conduct and say things that are unacceptable. We will refer this to the Labour Party. I know they will take it seriously, but we have held ourselves well. Our voice has been heard, and we will continue to use our voice to make sure that voters in the UK can vote according to their political persuasions, not because they're frightened of what might happen in the future or their future in this country. So we have to carry on the good fight, the good work, but we will be supportive, and we will make sure that we do this across all political parties, because anti-Semitism is across society. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission have now been satisfied that Labour has come out of special measures. So we need to look at all parties and to see what people are saying and doing and make sure that anti-Semitism is called out. And I think that it's very important that we have that reminder. It's not all good news for everybody, because it's never going to be gone completely. It would be unrealistic. But we have to say that Keir Starmer has shown huge leadership, and he's made it clear that the whip was removed from Jeremy Corbyn, and he will not be standing again as an MP for the Labour Party. So I think that's extremely, extremely good news. So we have to carry on and be vigilant and carry on our processes. Deputies know where they can make complaints, and it's also very important we recognise the Jewish Labour Movement who brought the EHRC complaint, and the work of our communal colleagues, the JLC and the CST, because we all came together to deal with anti-Semitism. So it's important that we keep up all of our relationships, so that we work together well as a community. Thank you, Louise, for the question. Robert.
Robert Stone, Fisher Reform Synagogue. Thank you, Madam President, for that excellent answer. It's great. However, in question 8 of the questions to the President, I asked why she and the HOs are blocking the work of the Constitution Working Group that I chair. In her first sentence, the President writes, the text submitted by Robert Stone's working group to the division was deemed by the chair of the Constitution Committee to be so vague that it couldn't be considered as a motion. That's one of 4 errors in the President's answer. I've only got time to deal with one. That statement is simply not true. 2 texts were submitted to the F&O division. The first was a draft note to HOs asking them to agree that we, the working group, should investigate the benefits and costs of dealing with the key risks to us deputies of the current constitution. The chair of the Constitution Committee raised no objection to that. It was agreed by the F&O, and it was submitted by the F&O to the HOs on the 30th December. The HOs gave no answer at all to that, despite constant reminders. Hence the second text, which was a motion drafted by Richard Sassoon and myself, a notice of motion to instruct the HOs to cooperate with us. Tony Leifer said that that was so vague as not to be an instruction. So on the 8th of February, the F&O discussed it, agreed an alternative form of wording that met Tony's objections, and we had a motion ready. But we withdrew the motion when Michael Ziff agreed, and I hope he's getting better, by the way, when Michael Ziff agreed to put us in touch with the lawyers to find out how much time and effort it would take to deal with these serious questions. The rest of the President's answer assumes that it would take too much. She can't know that because the only thing we want to investigate is how big are the risks to deputies and how much time and effort would it cost to mitigate those risks. She can't know the answer to that because she won't let us investigate it. Thank you.
First of all, good that we're back to threats, isn't it? We spent most of last triennium trying to change the constitution. We spent £64,000. We took it to a vote and it didn't pass because any changes to the constitution need to have a 66% super majority. Robert Stone was informed that myself and the other honorary officers on the 30th of December, we were taking a holiday. I take very little time and I didn't think it was appropriate for us to have to receive any sort of papers whilst we made it clear that we were all taking a very well-deserved break. One of the HOs was also on their delayed honeymoon, so I think that was entirely unrealistic. The working group is Robert Stone's working group, not the Constitution working group. Can we not have heckling from the floor, please? And thank you. I have to conduct the meeting, so I would also ask you not to. Point of information,
President, it was the F&O's working group appointed by the F&O.
Can we please not have heckling from the floor? I don't think it's polite. I'm sorry, even though you've said that in the front, it's not your turn to speak. We made it clear that we're not prepared to drop tools and to go and do the Constitution again. This triennium is a very difficult thing to do. What the board needs most are 2 independent trustees in the foundation and in the limited company, so that there are separate structures and that the 2 trustees have expertise. That actually doesn't need a change in the constitution. That's what I think is very important. That doesn't seem to be something that's being picked up, but that's something that is very, very key to the working of the board. So I've been doing the job now for nearly 5 years, and I can tell you I'm now spending about 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. And the person who comes in will have to learn, and it takes a lot of time and experience. And experienced trustees are really what are needed. This can't necessarily always be produced. It might be by election, but 2 additional trustees. That's what I think would be the most important change to begin from the new triennium, which I have said before. So no disrespect to anyone else. I'm just saying what it was, and we're going to enter an election period soon. People may all be standing for election. It's not going to be possible to actually have a major change. And even if there is a change that's agreed, it would need to change the whole structure of the board if there's incorporation and all deputies are members. It needs a great deal of thought, and it would take a very long time. It would take a huge amount of resources, staff time, staff training. And I'm quite happy in the next triennium, when I'm not president, when I'm past president, if people really want constitutional change, and I do understand what is needed or what is possible, then I would be happy when I'm not president anymore and I've got the time to do it, to help deliver that change. And I think that's that's very fair, but we're very, very near, relatively, the end of the triennium. And constitutions are very, very difficult to change. We're not the only organisation that's got an unincorporated entity, but it is very tricky, and we did our very, very best, but it took over the whole of the last triennium. It got very, very heated, and we spent £64,000. So there are other ways in which we can deal with the issue. So there is no disrespect to Robert Stone, but I have been really open, and so have the other HOs, that we are not in a position to actually drive through, at this point, constitutional change at present. And we did try last triennium, but at the end of the day, we are a democratic organisation, and after a lot of time and effort and involvement, we did not get a super majority. But I would urge the consideration of 2 extra independent trustees for each of the foundation and the limited company, so that it would make the 2 organisations independent. Thank you. Jerry.
Jerry Lewis, Hampstead Synagogue. I wish, contrary to our expectations, to endorse the answer you've just given. May I point out to you, Madam Chairman, President, that I have used various email addresses for you in the past. You've always received my emails, and for you to say this morning one is not good enough really doesn't hold water. May I please raise 3 things with you, and for the Deputy's knowledge, I have given you full notice of them. 1, there was a disgusting article in the Jewish Chronicle last week by Melanie Phillips, which was outrageous, attacked the board and attacked others on the Holocaust. Robert Stone, what's the name? Can you stop the clock for a moment, please, while this is going on? Can you stop the clock, please?
Jerry, we know.
Okay.
No, the clock stopped. Don't worry. I'm sorry.
Would you just finish the consultation with
I'll finish it afterwards. It's fine. Please carry on. I'm sorry.
I don't want any deputy to be upset.
No deputy is going to be upset.
Right. As I was saying, the article was outrageous in my view. Her attack, I know it was replied to by Olivia Walden-Marks, but really the board should have put in a response as well. And we've got to stop this nonsense in the community because it's damaging. Second point, as you are aware, the former deputy ambassador in Israel, from the Israeli embassy, was traduced at an African Unity Assembly, and I find that something we need to intervene with. And for those that don't know, James Cleverly is going as Foreign Secretary to Israel. We ought to brief him to make sure he can raise that. Final point, this is a googly, but it's a very fair googly, I believe. I understand there are changes being made about our premises. You have not, Madam President, told us a thing about it, and deputies ought to be aware we're being kicked out of here. We should have been told. Thank you.
Okay, so to come through first of them. Right, I'm very sorry, but I do not receive any emails sent to my Vice President board address. The only reason I know about it is just when I was sitting here, Michael Uyghur forwarded the email to me, and I could see that it was sent to my Vice President address. That's just been cut off, and I'm afraid I really don't get it. So I really apologise. I really apologise for that. But that's just one of those things. Can I start with Sharon Barley? What happened to her was awful. She's been treated in a terrible way, hounded out of a conference. And I made contact with her after Shabbat last night, and she was very grateful for the support. And that was a very, very difficult experience for her. And most of us will remember her here. She was absolutely amazing. She always played a very key part in the community, and we're very sorry to hear this news. In relation to Melanie Phillips' article, I can see afterwards that Laura Marks has got her hand up, and I anticipate that she's going to want to speak about that. So I will also just keep that brief and say that I was astonished also to read that she has described the Holocaust Memorial as a desecration of the Shoah. that is certainly not what anybody in the mainstream community thinks, and that really is so beyond the pale. I'm astonished it was even printed. In relation to the premises, we are here without paying rent, and it's true that we had expected to be here a little longer, but we have been given notice to leave. We are in the process of negotiating for a home, and I'm going to leave that to Michael Ziff to come on to in the F&O division, because they've been working very hard on that with our chief executive. So this has only just happened, so it is unfortunate. We have got used to it here, but we will make sure that we go on to good things. So I hope I've answered Jerry's question. I'm just still waiting just for the minutes. So I'm going to go online. Can I come on to Laura, because I think she will probably want to follow up on the Melanie Phillips article.
Thank you, Marie. And Jerry, thank you for raising this, because it is a really big issue. I mean, the issues are, I think, let me just clarify a little bit for people. The Holocaust Memorial and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust are separate organizations, and Melanie Phillips took a swipe at both in her article. I don't know if people saw the article, but the first thing to say that puts it into context is the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust on our board. I chair the board. And on our board, we have 5 people who are specifically there to ensure a Jewish voice is heard. So 3 members of the Board of Deputies are there, of which Marie is one, and 2 members of HET sit on our board, or 2 appointees of HET. So we are very, very heavily ensured that we can't forget the Holocaust. The thing that particularly was galling about the whole thing was, so this was an article that Melanie Phillips wrote that basically said that the memorial and the Holocaust Memorial Day are focused on other genocides and are ignoring the Holocaust. And it's simply not true what she said. In fact, it was massively irresponsible. So she said there was no mention of the genocide of the Jews other than 2 fleeting references in personal messages from Michael Gove and Keir Starmer. But actually, that's simply not true. The national commemoration, which you can still watch online, had contributions by Martin Stern and a whole film about the Holocaust by David Suchet, readings by faith and political readers from the diary of a man who was murdered in the Holocaust, sequences from a book, which is a bystander, a speech by the chief rabbi, the Jewish memorial prayer delivered by a survivor. So it was absolutely jam-packed full of Holocaust. And I think that Melanie Phillips's focus on this is just massively distortionist. I'm running out of time, but I will just ask, I suppose, if I have a question, it's to ask Marie to support the work we're doing and to recognize that just because you talk about other genocides too, it doesn't detract from the Holocaust, and nor does it in any way diminish the Holocaust, which is the murder of 6 million Jews. And what it does is it enables us to see these things happen again and again, including anti-Semitism today. So I think it's really important that we don't let people distort the Holocaust or distort what people are doing to support the Holocaust. And I would ask you to hear that and recognize that the memorial is in the same place. And Marie, to thank you for being on the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust board and to ask you to continue to support Laura. The work we do.
Thank you. I absolutely support the Holocaust Memorial Trust. Thank you. And of course, the board is also under the auspices. We do fantastic work with Yom HaShoah, which is going to come up shortly. Nothing can ever equate to the Holocaust, the murder and massacre, industrial massacre of 6 million Jews, the terrible genocides and crimes against humanity, which, as Laura said, absolutely have to be called out. I cannot express enough my disappointment, revulsion at Melanie Phillips' article. I think that's shared by everybody in the room. I cannot even imagine why someone would want to write such an article, and thank you, Laura. I have to give my apologies, deputies. I'm now going to have to suspend the meeting. It will be suspended online and in the room, because I have to try to understand the point of order which has been raised by Robert Stone. So I can only apologise to you. So can we cease live streaming? And I hope to come back to you as soon as possible. I have tried to streamline the procedures by referral to the Constitution Committee, but I can't get to understand it. So I'm really, really sorry. Thank you. Well, we'll hear the point of order.
Okay. So my point of order, which I wish to make now, but don't expect to be resolved till after the meeting, is that the President has just breached the Constitution, because the Constitution says that the Executive Committee shall manage the work of the board through the divisional boards. She consulted the lawyers on this issue without consulting the divisional board, the F&O, and she asked the wrong question and got an answer to the issues that we haven't raised. By breaching the Constitution, she's wasted everybody's time. But I will ask the chair of the Constitution Committee out of this meeting, offline, whether it's true that she breached the Constitution or not.
I will answer the question. I think it's important that we don't make allegations. Michael Ziff actually went to see the lawyer and contacted the lawyer, and then there was some email correspondence that I was copied into. I did not initiate contact with the lawyer, and I think it's very careful before people make accusations that you consider that, because
the accusation stands.
You could have asked that. I'm afraid that Michael Ziff is the chair, I believe, of the F&O.
It says through the divisions, not the chairs of the divisions.
I think Michael Ziff is entitled.
Okay, I will write to the chair of the Constitution Committee and ask him to rule on it.
I think people have to assume that people act in good faith here. And Michael Ziff is the chair of his division. He's perfectly entitled to seek advice, and it's a responsible thing to do, but we can't really afford to spend any more money. We spent £64,000 before, and that's a serious thing. We are in a cost of living crisis, and again, what's most urgent is there are 2 independent trustees for the foundation and the limited company with skills. That's really what is needed. It's a very tough job, this, and with social media it's even more difficult. And from experience, I can only say to you that is something. And I'm very happy when I'm not president and I'm sitting at home with nothing to do. I'm sure I won't be doing nothing to do. In good faith, I'm happy to help steer through constitutional changes that are wanted. And I know we'll know how to do it, but it will take time. It could take 18 months to 2 years, if at all. Right, okay, so can I now go? I'm going to go online. It's the turn online, so I do apologise. We are short on time. I'm just going to see who doesn't speak as much, to be fair. Benny Ross, can you please also say your name and your constituency?
Hello, I'm still on mute. Yes, Benny Ross, Reformed Judaism. My question is to Louise Ellman on your report a few minutes ago. You said it's important that we keep up all our relationships. Can you explain to us how that relates to relationships with those Jewish people in the Labour Party, and I know some of these people, who still support socialist policies and have become excluded from the education processes in the Labour Party, which they want to contribute to, and in many cases have been forced out of the party altogether. I refer partly to Jewish Voice for Labour, but other people as well, who I know are members of the Labour Party. I'm not one myself.
Thank you for your question. I'm just going to say this, you might not like the answer. As far as I'm concerned, Jewish Voices for Labour were formed to just deny anti-Semitism. They should not be given any oxygen. And I had the very unpleasant experience of encountering some of these people when I had to give evidence for hours at the court hearing for Reverend Sizer before the Anglican Church. So I really feel that it's a matter also for the Labour Party who they exclude, but I've got, on my part, no desire whatsoever to work with Jewish Voices for Labour or anybody else that makes up that organisation. Thank you for your question. Joe.
Hi, Joe Millis, Bromley Reform Synagogue. This is about refugees and the attacks on refugees in, excuse me, thank you. This is about refugees and the attacks on refugees that have happened quite recently and often, and the rise in visits to refugee centres by Britain First, a fascist organisation. Does the President not think that using the terminology that the current Home Secretary has used has led to this or is leading to this, and the general hostile atmosphere in this country towards refugees who are not from Europe? Also, does the President think that if somebody of the ilk of Braverman was Home Secretary in the 30s, even the paltry number of people who were allowed over by the kinder transport and other people fleeing persecution in Europe would be allowed in? Thank you.
My grandfather was on the kinder transport, so I feel very strongly I've got a refugee history, as many of us have in our family, and how refugees are treated is very, very important to me. And we have cautioned about the use of language. We all want safe ways for refugees, genuine refugees, to be able to come to this country. And of course, their plight really does bother me. So I've arranged a visit next month. I'm going to go to the camps in Calais for myself to see how they're treated. We're not a front-facing organisation campaigning for refugees, but we will do what we can. And I know you want to go further than that, Joe, but I'm afraid language is very important. We have cautioned, and I say again, against the use of bad language. But this is really something that is very difficult for all of us to accept, and we all want to help and do more for refugees. So thank you for your question. I've given you my answer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll let you know when I've come back from the camp in Calais. I think it's important to see that. I admit that I've not actually been there. It will have a big impact. Next online, Tessa Milligan.
Tessa Milligan Yahad. The board has consistently taken a commendable stance supporting the two-state solution, reaffirmed recently by the Deputies' vote in August 2020. The new Israeli government has explicitly stated its opposition to the two-state solution, signing coalition agreements outlining plans for the entrenchment of the occupation and the creation of a single Jewish and undemocratic state between the river and the sea. As Deputy Minister of National Jewish Identity, Avi Maoz, has stated, the dream of the Jewish state in the land of Israel is what all the generations have dreamt of and fought for. They did not dream of a state of all its citizens, nor of the only democracy in the Middle East. Those are his words. Similarly, Minister of Diaspora Affairs, Amichai Shikli, stated, we are in the midst of a campaign to shape the image of the state of Israel. On the question of whether it will be the nation state of the Jewish people, unflinchingly and without talking nonsense, if we are the masters of the house in Lod and Judea and Samaria. Do these views and planned actions align with the tolerant and inclusive values of our community as outlined in the board's statement on the new government? Or if not, can you please name a single member of the new Israeli government who shares the board's values in regards to maintaining Israel both democratic and Jewish, and our commitment to a two-state solution?
Thank you. Thank you for your speech. The board has voted on the two-state solution, which clearly remains our policy. I did report to deputies last time that I have been to Israel on several occasions. I have seen President Herzog, and I have made our community's concerns known. Deputies will remember, of course, before the election, we also made our concerns known about Smotrich, which went right across Israel. I'm going to Israel again next Sunday, and Michael and I have got a meeting with the Minister of the Diaspora, Shikli, where we again will put our concerns. We can't provide a running commentary. There's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of concern, particularly at the moment, about any changes to the Supreme Court. We share those concerns. We will continue to call out those concerns where it will also impact upon Jews in the UK, whether they are, for example, LGBTQ, Reform Jews, any changes to the right of return. I think it's fair to say from looking at the protests that we are all seeing that there are many people that share these concerns, but we also have to look and see what actions are being taken. So again, I will be going to Israel. I will make those concerns known to the minister, and then I will report back next plenary. But thank you for that. I think it's important that you raise those issues. Thank you. In the room, Harriet.
Thank you, Madam President. Harriet Goldenberg, Liberal Jewish Synagogue. Just following on from that, I'm very happy to hear what you've just said. I'm sure you're aware of the Choose Democracy campaign that is going on at the moment. I recently signed the campaign along with 13 other organizations representing 50,000 Jews in the country. And I would be very pleased in advance of your trip to hear whether it's possible that the board might take that kind of stand as well. It seems to be fairly straightforward, just holding on to our principles and the ideas that you have just outlined yourself, and would simply be making a declaration that as an important part of the diaspora, we are clearly very affected by what the current government is potentially going to put into action, and this would be a way of stating our views and our worries.
Thank you. I don't feel it's appropriate for the board to sign a campaign. We've said clearly what our position is. We're not going to have some sort of campaign against the state of Israel. We're going to deal with the issues. We've said what our concerns are. It's not appropriate for the board to be part of a campaign. We have to deal with the issues as they are, and we represent a very, very diverse community with very different views. For example, in a minute I can see Mary Rainier Lee and Lawrence Julius. They may have something different to say. They may feel that I shouldn't be commenting at all. And on the world stage, when I look at people who are lay leaders in other countries, I am one of the most outspoken people that you will find, but we represent a very diverse community, and there are different views. I think that we've been very, very clear what is not acceptable, that we're not going to provide a running commentary, and it will really weaken our position if we start signing off campaigns, because people listen when we talk, and we have to consider in a very measured way what we say and when we say it. But thank you for drawing it to our attention. So with that, Lawrence Julius.
Hi, Mary. Calling from Tel Aviv Beach. On Thursday, I actually heard President Herzog expecting some kind of conciliation, people coming together. So I think things will change. And I do agree with your earlier suggestion of two trustees. But I was really coming back to the question I asked to you. I think the BBC, you did exactly the right thing about calling out a pundit on GB News who has a horrible track record. And you replied to me that you would call out other pundits strategically. I think we need to do it consistently across all channels. Channels like Al Jazeera and BBC Arabic regularly call out pundits who have got horrendous histories, and I feel we should consistently call out all of them. I'd like your views on that.
It was very difficult, unfortunately, for me to hear you. I'm very jealous of where you are now. It looks very, very different. Look, we have criticised GB News. Where it's appropriate, we will continue to criticise, just like the BBC. We're not going to have a campaign against the BBC. We're going to deal with issues when they arise. And I would report that I had a very positive and constructive meeting with the Director General and the head of the new newsroom, and we have to look at each situation. But certainly, GB News is, should we say, more than on our radar. But I really apologise that I couldn't hear everything that you were saying. Thank you. In the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Stav Salpeter, under 35 representative for Yachad UK. So just following on from our conversation about Israel, I've recently been to Israel for a friend's wedding, and the overwhelming sense that I've gotten from family and friends there is worry about the newest, most far-right government in Israel's history. And I think we've reached a turning point. And as an Israeli, I am worried. I'm worried that members of the new government have already proposed legislation that would override non-discrimination laws that would allow doctors to choose not to treat patients just because they're gay. It worries me that the current government proposed an override clause which would render the Supreme Court powerless in preventing such laws from passing in the future. And it worries me that ministers in this government have repeatedly called for a second Nakba and signed coalition agreements that commit to the annexation of the West Bank, with Kahanist government ministers vocally calling for the expulsion of Palestinian citizens of Israel and citizens who don't share their views. So I'm worried, and I think that for all of us who care about Israel's future, this should worry us as well. I think we can't really give in to this worry, but there are things that we can do to take an active stance and to stop the horrifying actions of this new government and stand on the side of Israelis who are fighting for democracy. One of the moments that I was happiest in my recent visit to Israel was standing alongside hundreds and thousands of protesters on the streets who say that a better future is possible, that we can still fight for the democratic Israel that we want to see in the peaceful country for our children.
You're on red.
And these Israelis need our support. And so I think it's time for us to really choose a side in the British Jewish community. And the thing is that we do have a choice in this matter. We can either remain silent and implicitly continue to support the actions of this extremist government, or we can stand by the side of those in Israel who are fighting for democracy. So my question to you is, will the board join the 13 communal organizations that represent over 50,000 people?
You're on red.
Beyond this room.
Thank you. You're on red. Thank you. We all love Israel in the community. There's no doubt about that continuing bond, and we all want a viable democratic state. And I'm sure that everyone is very concerned that we have a right-wing government, and we've made our concerns known. I've made it very clear to the president, even before the election. I repeat, in the case of Smotrich, we also made our concerns known. We are an organisation, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and where it impacts upon Jews in the UK. And I will go over it again. For example, any changes to the law of return, any impact on LGBTQ communities, the egalitarian prayer space at the Women of the War, those issues and changes potentially also to the Supreme Court are really issues that are of concern. But Israel has chosen its government, like many countries in the world. There is a right-wing government, so that alone makes it very difficult. I have seen the president a number of times. He is aware of our concerns, and I have an imminent meeting now coming up with the Minister of the Diaspora. And you can rest assured that I will tell the Minister again the concerns of the UK community, but they're seeing those concerns. People are demonstrating on streets, and I'm sure that there are many Israel advocacy organisations in the UK, front-facing organisations that you would also want to talk to. But we are more than doing our bit here, in my view. But thank you. I understand. Right, so I'm only going to take Mary Rainier Lee and you afterwards. No, Mary first, online. Thank you. Because I'm told I'm over time. I'm very, very sorry. I've lost some time, which was unfortunate. Mary Rainier Lee.
Thank you very much. Basically, I'm going back to the memorial. Obviously, we all support the Memorial Trust in terms of memorizing the terrible, terrible things that the Holocaust created. My problem is that we have not actually had a decision by the board by its members as to whether we support the existing proposal, which is to build the Holocaust Memorial Centre where it is going to be. I am deeply shocked that the government is going to change the law. Somebody prescribed and gave that site to the public for the future indefinitely. And to take it by changing the law, I think is immoral. I'm also not happy about the placing of it. I'm not happy about the way the money is going to be spent on a huge memorial when we ought to be distributing stuff about what the Holocaust meant in terms of teaching into the classrooms, into the schools and the books. I know we do it already, but we need to do more of it. And I'm also extremely distressed by the extraordinary and awful architecture. I think it's awful. So anybody who goes there will look at it, will think how awful it is. And I think, and I know that we ought to be discussing this again in terms of a open discussion with all the deputies as to whether we approve of this particular thing, whether we approve stealing something from a gift to the public to make the Holocaust Memorial where they're proposing, which seems to me in any case a completely unsuitable site, bearing in mind it's
I'm going to stop, Mary, because I'm concerned that some of your comments are bordering on the defamatory, making accusations about stealing or just. I think we need to be very, very careful. The government hasn't stolen anything. The fact is, we've had a very long inquiry. The chief rabbi, members of the community, Holocaust survivors all gave evidence to the inquiry, welcomed the commission. The government is going to change the law to have a Holocaust memorial. We've had Lord Pickles here to speak. We've also had Sally Seeley. I don't think it was necessary to insult Sir David Adigi for his architecture. I have to say, he designed the synagogue in Abu Dhabi where I've just been, and it is the most incredible building. His work is amazing. He's so very, very sincere about wanting it to be beautiful. I'm so disappointed and I'm sorry if you want to say this in the front row, people still wanting to campaign against a Holocaust memorial. I don't really understand it. It's been part of the board policy and the manifesto for a very long time, and the government is going to do it. And I welcome and support the government's commitment to the Holocaust memorial. And I don't think that there's anything else that needs to be said. It will be built, and I hope that everybody will come behind it, and it will do very, very good work in the future to remind millions and millions of people in the face of Parliament the dangers and the horror of the Holocaust and other genocides. Thank you.
Stanley Volk, Finchley Progressive Synagogue. I too like to talk about Israel, but I'd like to ask the President and people here to have a note of optimism as regards what's happening in Israel. I just made a few notes that I have made from the press and other commentators. Israel is a right-wing country that has largely voted in right-wing governments for over 40 years. But that doesn't make them illegitimate or fundamentally undemocratic. Now, Netanyahu is a master politician. Let's agree on that. He knows the risk of overreach and how his own position will be impacted if Israel's economy suffers, or harsher policies in the West Bank lead to a third intifada, or the collapse of the Palestinian Authority. Why votes were cast as they were was not primarily to unpend Israel's whole political and judicial system, but to improve the economy and restore a sense of personal security to Israelis. Some radical parties were beneficiaries, but that's not the same as the majority of Israelis who put this prospective coalition to power supporting their radical ideas. Now, I must say, there has been signals from both religious Zionists and Ozma Yehudit since the election intended to project a moderate image from Ben Gvir's open letter to his brothers on the left, which he pledged protection and security to Israeli Arabs, to religious Zionist MPs promising they do not intend to roll back LGBTQ rights. This suggests that they have an internal sense that they can't bulldoze everything in their path over those skeptical of their aims. Another moderating influence is outside parties who, Netanyahu and Naftali Bennett, both signed scientific cooperation.
You're on red.
Trade agreements with the European Union.
Thank you. Thank you.
While he's no stranger.
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up. You've made your point. You've made your point well. I'm not sure that you will carry the room, because in fairness, I think everybody does share the concerns about what's happening in Israel. Whether or not they're going to talk out, it is a real matter of concern and worry. There is a lot of rhetoric. So again, we will have to wait and see what happens. I need to apologise to those online. I'm sorry, I've lost time. I can't come to all of your questions. I'm very, very sorry. I'm now going to come on to Michael Ziff. Now, he's not well. He's got COVID. So please be nice to him. And if you can be as quick as possible, otherwise we will end up cutting up more time on the other divisional reports. Are you there, Michael?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I apologise for not being in presence, but I don't think any of you want to catch COVID, and I'm still testing positive, unfortunately. And this is day 5, I think. You have in front of you the Finance and Organisation report. You have the numbers in front of you. I'll take any questions that anybody wants to make from the accounts. Clearly, last year was a poor year in terms of the operating income deficit. It's been well explained during the course of the year. I don't propose to go through it again. And I hope that this year, the budgets that we've set will be ones at which we can adhere to and keep to as close as possible. There are a couple of other things that I would like to raise from the meeting. Communal contribution. Excuse me.
Really sorry. Are you okay, Michael?
Yeah, I'm not going to die. The communal contributions are really a very, very important part of our fundraising. I'd request that all of us try and take some sort of responsibility with this. It's something that I want to get out and about now and start to talk to you about and see how we can up the amounts raised from each of the synagogues, because this is really a key part of income that we need. The other part that was raised earlier this morning was the question about the property. I can tell you that we are in negotiation on a number of properties. Unsurprisingly, as in business, which this is, there is a degree of confidentiality around this. I promise to keep you fully informed of what goes on and the process and how we're doing with the negotiations, as and when we have something that is agreed. But at this stage, we will be going into temporary accommodation. And as soon as we've found somewhere, we will come to the board, seek approval in the correct way, give you full information of the package and of the deal that we're trying to do. And that's about as best as I can offer you at this stage. But it is being looked at daily. I was meant to go and have a look at one of the properties, which a couple of my colleagues have looked at the previous week. I was meant to go this week, but for obvious reasons couldn't go on Thursday or Friday. Beyond that, I've got nothing else that I can add today. Any questions, please fire them away to me.
I can see online that Vicky Harris has got her hand up.
Hi, Vicky.
Vicky Harris, Hampstead Garden Suburb United Synagogue. Michael, I wish you a refuah shalema.
Thanks.
I'm sorry that I didn't get called for my question on the previous matter, but I do have a question for you, Michael. I wonder whether when you next present your Treasurer's report, we could have a little more detail about how the expenditure is distributed between the different activities of the board. The board does many wonderful activities, but it would be very helpful to see how the expenditure comes across those different activities. Thank you.
Not a problem. I'll talk with Brian. He's not around today, but when he's back, I'll have a conversation with Brian about it to see how we can best present that.
I don't know whether, Michael, you could also perhaps have a meeting that might be open to deputies who want to understand it a bit more as well. Sometimes it's difficult just to see it from the figures, if that was wanted.
Yeah, happily to arrange a Zoom or a teach-in or whatever about the budgets to one evening or something like that for as many people to want to join outside of a plenum. So I think actually, Vicky, that's probably even a better idea.
There you are, the thumbs up. Anybody else? Thank you. Then that will help save some time, and we'll go back now. Thank you again, David. Happy birthday. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And what a pleasure it is to spend my birthday surrounded by friends. I don't know why you laugh. I'd like to start by saying in the last meeting, we reported that unfortunately our previous international relations officer, Talia Ingleby, left. I'm very pleased to announce that we are in the very final stages of the recruitment of our new officer, just awaiting references. So hopefully by the time of, in fact, the next divisional meeting, the new international relations officer will be in place. I'm not going to speak about the report because you've all had it and read it, and obviously I'm more than happy to answer questions on it. I do specifically just want to say on the IRGC, we will be continuing to push for the full prescription. We'll be raising that in every meeting that we have and that we can with the Foreign Office, as well, of course, as with the Home Office. I won't talk about the Abraham Accords because Marie very ably covered that and thankfully led, I would like to say, the British delegation to the opening of this new synagogue. We are continuing to plan this mission to Israel, and I'm hopeful that an email will be going out to deputies this week with information, with kind of a draft outline of what that could involve. Very hopeful. I remember a few meetings ago, we had a raise of hands as to who might be interested in joining for such a delegation, and we had a really good number there. So I'm hopeful that deputies will like the plan that we are suggesting and will want to get involved with that. Just for information, we're currently looking at early December for this Israel mission. And the last thing I'll say is, unfortunately, I will not be at the next plenary meeting. I'll be in Geneva. We've been invited to speak at the Human Rights Council. It's the UK's turn for its UPR, its Universal Periodic Review, and we will be speaking on that thanks to the WJC. Of course, you will all know that I'm very keen that the Board of Deputies receives its own special consultative status at ECOSOC, that we'll be able to, in the future, speak in our own right at these meetings, and that is ongoing. So with that, I would like to hand over to you for questions. Thank you. A flurry of raised hands.
It must be because it's David's birthday. Or I think everybody probably has said or given the sentiment of their concerns one way or another about Israel. We've got one hand, have we? Got one taker. Here you go. I'm sure he will be very nice to you on your birthday. Oh, we've now got Paul online, Paul Edlin. 2 questions.
Okay, Joe Millis still with Bromley Reform Synagogue. I hear that Michael and Marie are going to meet Shikli. Will you be part of that delegation?
No, I won't be joining on this trip to Israel.
Okay. Part 2. And this is more directed at Marie and Michael, well, Marie, will we get a readout of your meeting with Shikli just to see well, basically, will we get a readout of your meeting with Shikli to see what was raised. Thank you very much.
I will indicate what was raised, but obviously it is a private meeting. It's not a verbatim meeting. Otherwise, nobody's going to be meeting us. We will raise, and you will have to trust that we will be raising all of the concerns. And we have been so public. We have not been shy about making it known. So please rest assured. But I will report back that the concerns were raised, and we're in Israel as part of a global summit conference, which is the reason that we're there. And whilst we were there, I wanted to have a meeting with the Minister of the Diaspora, so that's incidental to us being there. And also we are going to say our deepest thanks and go and see the British Ambassador Neil Wigan, because his term of office will shortly be at an end, and he has been an excellent ambassador. So we'll be combining a number of things, and rest assured I will tell you how the meeting went.
Okay, and I understand Paul Edlin. There's a question.
Hi.
Oh, great, we're getting a lineup.
Thank you. First of all, happy birthday, David. Hope it's a good one. Many happy returns. My question is about the European Jewish Congress. I wrote to the president and she gave an entirely correct response. The board have suspended membership of the European Jewish Congress for entirely valid reasons. However, in her reply, she mentioned that the board is helping individual Jewish communities in Europe at the moment. Can you please exemplify that? Tell me exactly what's going on with that, how much you're able to help the other communities in Europe without the involvement of a European Jewish Congress? And also, are there any plans in the World Jewish Congress? I know they've got a representative in Brussels. Are there any possibilities of them forming a separate European Grand Committee of some sort in order to replace the European Jewish Congress? Because this situation has been going on for some time now, and our reputation as a supporter of the smaller communities, Jewish communities in Europe, is getting damaged by our inability to act, I suspect, because we're not in that organization anymore. So your answer to these questions would be appreciated.
Thanks, Paul. I'll leave some of that finer detail to Marie, and I'm sure she'll be grateful of me for doing so. What I will just say is, in terms of us working with smaller communities around Europe, this is something that we take incredibly seriously. We always have. It's something that we have always done on a bilateral basis anyway, as well as having previously worked through the EJC. And that's something that's continuing and that we are strengthening. Whenever I meet with ambassadors from other countries, we always speak with our sister communities first to understand the needs of that community. When communities come to us with question, we always do what we can to make representations over here on their behalf and to whoever we can on their behalf. So I absolutely don't think that our reputation there is being damaged. And frankly, for the reasons that you stated aside, I think that our current status with the EJC is probably helping that reputation as opposed to doing any damage to it. I'm really proud of the work we're doing with smaller communities, and I can guarantee to you that we will continue to do so.
Thank you. Just to add, I'm also very proud of all the work we're doing with the communities throughout Europe and the world. Those relationships are not impacted. We see all the countries and all the communities at the World Jewish Congress. They're the same people and the same communities. And more than that, I'm on my second summit to Israel, so I'm going to see all these European communities again. In fact, we all see a lot of each other in different hats, different guises, different events, but we are the same people. Our reputation, if we didn't call out the fact that the EJC would not investigate a treasurer where there were concerns of child abuse, would have been absolutely destroyed if we had continued with that. So I can't really accept what Paul's got to say. I think there will be funding problems with the European Jewish Congress. I think there was an article in Haaretz recently about that, and what happens in the future we will see, but I'm sure that those countries will continue to be represented. And as I say, we see everybody at the World Jewish Congress and they care for all of their all of their communities. So there's no detriment, as David said, and I want to give thanks to David for all the fantastic work that he does, and no small community will be turned away. And if there's something that happens, we will always check with the community. We've got a visit to France, to the Crieff soon, where we're going to see the refugee camps. So it's business as usual. But in the UK, we did the right thing. We wouldn't work with an organisation where they refuse to investigate sexual abuse allegations of their treasurer, and it would have been unforgivable of us to ignore that and carry on as business as usual. So our reputation has been enhanced, not destroyed, as David has said, and history will be on the right side of us because we always do the right thing here.
Thank you very much. Jerry.
Jerry Lewis Hampstead Synagogue. Yom Huledet Sameach. 3 points. Number one, none of us have been told yet what Mr. Lauder and the WJC think of the EJC. And I think we would ought to be informed as to what their take is and whether they're boycotting or not boycotting, and whether there is any risk of another organisation stepping in to take over EJC's role. Second of all, you have a point in your report about the proscription of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. I've sat in the House of Commons press gallery so many times over the last few months and read so many articles about it going to happen, yet no minister has done a thing about it. And I'm wondering whether we can, through both the Defence and International Division, really ask, when is it going to happen? Because otherwise, people are going to get suspicious about what's happening generally with regard to this and the Iran nuclear talks. Final point is a googly, and I'm sorry to throw you one. And also, it's not a reflection on the gentleman himself. It's a comment. We will have read that a new ambassador has been appointed, British ambassador. To the first time in my knowledge, and I can stand corrected if I got it wrong, but we are having an appointee who is studying Hebrew at the moment in Israel, but has served as the Consul General in Jerusalem. That embassy is not an embassy, it's a Consulate General, reports via Jordan to the Foreign Office. And its previous incumbents, I'm not saying the current one, its previous incumbents have been, quotes, pro-Palestinian, close quotes, to a very considerable degree. My only worry is that we may get a situation by which the new ambassador to Israel may not.
I think we're out of time there, Jerry.
Yes,
sorry,
may
but I
just finish the
get that.
sentence?
Go for it.
Thank you. That the new ambassador, and we haven't yet met him, may not necessarily be of the same ilk and support that Neil Wigan has been. He's been superb. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Look, I think that it's only right that we leave the WJC's view to the WJC. I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody else or any other organisation. That's not my place or our place. On the IRGC, this is something that we and our whole community feel very, very passionately about. And we do everything we can at every opportunity that we have to make those feelings clear. And as I said before, we will continue to do that. I think that we've been buoyed by the fact that there has been very clear and vocal support from the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who has said that they would prescribe the IRGC. We've had very good indications also from the government, and we're very hopeful that this awful organisation that funds the murder of Jews around the world will be fully prescribed here in the UK. On your last point, again, I'm not going to speak to the character of anyone. We've always had very good relationships with British ambassadors to Israel, and I have no reason to believe that that would change. And I'm very pleased that Marie will be meeting with the new ambassador when she is in Israel. But in England, sorry. She'll be meeting with the new British ambassador to Israel shortly. So thank you, and I hope that answers your points. I'll take one more, if that's okay, before we move on to another division, because we are running fairly short on time. Yeah, I'll take Flora. I hope you'll forgive me, Joy, but I hope you know that as a member of the division, you can ask me any question at any point, as of course can anybody else. Flora.
You unmute me. Oh, hello, thank you. David, first of all, happy birthday again. Yom Huledet Sameach. I will have two questions to do with the mission, the coming mission, which I think is of the utmost importance in light of the new government, the very extreme government, and it's a concern to all of us. And I think a stronger delegation. I know Marie is very able and very eloquent in speaking, but a one-to-one is not the same as a delegation going and showing, you know, our feelings. So the two questions are, what is the cost? Is it going to be prohibitive? Because I think as many deputies as possible should be allowed to go. And secondly, can you give us the date as early as possible? I'm already booked. I'm an Israeli citizen myself, and I share the concern that was put so eloquently about from Glynis, and it wasn't Glynis, another gentleman, I didn't get his name, but time being the essence. I think we must differentiate between a right with government and those who may be on the right, and many people on the right, and I know I live in Israel half of the time, share the concerns that we are horrified at some of the suggestions, one of them being, which upsets me more than anything, that a doctor is not allowed to treat an LGBT or whatever. It is absolutely horrific. And I speak as somebody who may be veering on the right, but I'm a person who believes in human rights. And I think this is something that nobody should allow. We have to speak very, amongst all the other things about reform divisions and things like that. It is not right. We can have our own faith, we can have our own beliefs, but Hashem is the God of everybody. And we're all very equal in his eyes, and we're all made in his image. And I feel this mission is of the utmost importance, David. And I think you should make the price as low as possible. We don't have to stay in posh hotels. I'm sure people can also put up, if I'm able to, I would put up one person or couple or whatever. It really should be something that we can all join in.
Thank you, Flora. I'd like to start by really thanking you for those comments that you made, which I think many, if not all of us, are fully in support of. There is, of course, great concern across the community, and we are doing what we can to convey those concerns at every appropriate forum. On the mission, yes, hopefully by end of Wednesday, certainly by the end of the week, we will have sent out an email with this kind of draft plan that will have some possible costs. It is, I'll be frank, more expensive than I'd have liked, less expensive than we might expect. These things aren't cheap, but we will be, and I'm currently trying to make sure that we definitely have, as large as possible, the ability for subsidies to be taking place so that nobody is unable to come because of age or money issues. So that will all be coming out in this email that will be coming out by the end of the week. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the many birthday wishes, and I am happy to pass on to whoever is next.
Thank you. Edwin Shuker, can you please present your report? Edwin is online.
Good afternoon, deputies. Thank you, Marie. And I would like to pay tribute to your tireless work. And this last trip of 36 hours is one of them. I also apologize for not attending the meeting and just doing it virtually. And I hope that soon I will be resuming and joining you, and I look forward to that. I also want to pay tribute to, while this carry on this my restrictive appearances, to the incredible staff that this division has, namely Dawn Waterman and Anna Silverman, Lauren, Adam. They are a magnificent support and an incredible work, not glamorous, but it's there day in, day out on education, on the communities. I also want to pay tribute to Vice Chair Andrew Gilbert and for taking on most of the work that is mental health, that is police, that is networking. Andrew has built an incredible network for the Jewish community through the board and through the London Jewish Forum, which we have access to many places that we have not been done that before. So thank you. I also want to pay tribute to Sheila Gelwood, to Hachi taking on the SACRI, the education, the London Jewish experience, the Jewish experience, and taking it to Blackburn, taking it, updating it, upgrading it, and thank you very much for that. The report is in front of you, and I'll be delighted to answer what I can, and if not, then I will refer it to Vice Chair Andrew. Thank you.
Sheila in the room.
Okay, thank you, Marie. It's all right. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. You know, everybody does a lot of work, Edwin. It's nice to be singled out, but, you know, especially Anna and Dawn, as you say, they do amazing stuff. So Sheila Gewald, Cardiff United Synagogue, just a couple of things to pick up to support the report. It talks about the Hounslow exhibition. It's actually going from the 20th of November to the 1st of December this year. And if anybody is happy to volunteer, please, we need Jewish guides to speak to the children. Anybody that's done this before, we used to have tours of Jewish Northwest London. And please get in touch with Anna or me if anybody's happy to contribute in any way. Hounslow is about, the council offices are about 10 minutes away from the tube station. There is also parking on site that can be arranged. Okay, it's so good to have positive stuff to report. I love it. Okay, so Marie, thank you wherever you are. You wrote a lovely piece in the Jewish Telegraph about the exhibition, really pushing out this fight to get to fighting anti-Semitism by talking to young people. It's great. And another aspect to our work, we're trying to get the exhibition now into workplaces. It would address the equality, diversity and inclusion element of a lot of professional organisations, and we are actually in conversations with some of these people. If anybody knows out there that you would like to take an element of the exhibition for 2 or 3 days with a few of the banners to educate the non-Jewish workforce, that would be great. And finally, heritage meeting. There's no report on the heritage activities because we haven't had a meeting yet, but Wednesday, the 8th of March, we're delighted that Michael Mayle, who's the Chief Executive for the Foundation for Jewish Heritage, will be coming to address hopefully the whole division. So he's done amazing work with heritage throughout Europe and the UK. And thank you, Edwin, for everything. And I wish you well.
Can I just also add my thanks and appreciation to Sarah Radivan, which I missed. Obviously, Sarah is the anchor person for my division. I see Louis Elman, but I can't hear.
She will.
Come in now. Hello.
Hi.
Oh, thank you, Edwin. Louise Elman, Jewish Labour Movement. And I want to refer to the reference to the Commission on Racial Inclusivity. And I'd like to know what progress is being made on addressing the issues raised concerning Jews of colour who do not define as part of the Sephardi or Mizrahi communities.
I am delighted you asked this because that gives me the opportunity to talk about this, my favorite subject. I think we have added, as we told you last plenary, a key person in the name Danny Jacobs, who have taken on this, together with Lee, have taken on this report item by item, including what the Jews of color, and you will be, I hope, appreciative of the work that will be done in the next few months. I give ourselves a target by the May plenary to give you a full report on, and also to declare that the Board of Deputies have taken on every single recommendation in that report on all of it. Hopefully we'll do that in May. We will also be announcing the review that was promised by Stephen Bush, and also the short, medium, and long term on how to make sure that these recommendations have been implemented, and we will do so on time and on budget.
Thank you. Any other questions for Edwin? Oh, thank you, Ruth.
Ruth Hart, Bournemouth Reformed Synagogue.
The 8th of March is also an important date in our calendar for another reason. It's International Women's Day. Now, the Jewish Women's Aid Subcommittee on the CE division, it doesn't have very many meetings. It gets on with doing stuff. As you know, on the 5th of March, there are going to be 2 fundraisers in London. I'd like to thank Judith and Flora for hosting. There'll be one in Bournemouth on the 12th. And I would also like to thank Gillian, who has arranged for funds to be gathered in Southport. So if you're not in London, you now have another way of supporting us. Sometimes we don't like to talk about it, but however frum you are, however sacred you believe your home life to be, however liberal you are, however much you believe in equality, however well educated you are, there is nowhere where there is not domestic violence, there is nowhere where there is not sexual abuse, and we need to extirpate this stain from our community once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much. I finished my report. Oh,
We've got one more question.
Sorry, can I
Edwin.
just add
Sure.
to reinforce everything Ruth said, but also I'm having one North London, even beyond North London, if you'd like to come round, 48 Lanchester Road, Highgate, March the 5th, 10:30 to 12:30. We've got a member of Muswell Hill Shul who is a Mackenzie friend who'll be talking about his work. So please spread it around, RSVP, so I make sure you've got enough coffee, etc. So please spread it around. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we come on to present the next report, unfortunately, we have lost some time, so it may not be possible to have all of the speakers, and I have to apologise if that happens, or any, depending on how long the report takes. So can I ask you, please, Amanda, to present your report? Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Can you hear me? Do I have to press a button? Just speak. You can. Okay. I just want to firstly follow up on the reference about supporting smaller Jewish communities in Europe. On Thursday of this week, I'm delighted to say that the Constitutional Committee of the Finnish Parliament voted that banning shahita would be unconstitutional. This is a huge result, the first victory for the Jewish community in over 100 years from a parliament on religious freedom in the Nordics. And it's a great testament to a huge amount of effort that has been taken both from the Jewish community in Finland, but Shahita UK, where, as you know, the board are a stakeholder, the World Jewish Congress and others, including the work that we did ourselves in engaging with the Finnish embassy here in London. Secondly, I want to remind deputies that we'll be hosting our next Open Anti-Semitism meeting and on the 27th of February at 5:30. If anyone wants to attend, please get in touch with Joe Crossley at the board. At this meeting, we'll be welcoming Ale Ravinsky from the CST, who's going to be talking to us about the extreme right terrorism and specifically her report on youth radicalisation. So please let us know if you'd like to join that meeting. You have my report and I'm delighted to take questions on it. Thank you. Okay, I can see online that I have questions from Carol Abrahams and then Amos Schoenfeld. Carol, you first.
Hello, Amanda. I addressed this question to Edwin, and he, of course, reminded me that interfaith is now your division and not community. What I asked was whether there's any chance that the Invest in Peace programme will be restarted. It was going for a few years before COVID, and it would be good to see it starting again. I was very happy that we had a meeting in Catford, and it was so well attended and so well received. So I would love to see this programme continue.
Thanks, Carol. Yes, Invest in Peace was a great programme. We ran it in partnership with the Britain's churches together. And we went to several communities around the UK, and we reviewed the progress of that along with the other partners we work with, most recently Solutions Not Sides. We all felt on all sides that it was time to pause that and to look at what else and what different we might want to do. It's really important that the work that it was doing about bringing communities together to understand each other and to look at what's actually going on in Israel is really important. What you may recall, Carol, we did as a pilot, as a potential follow-up to Invest in Peace, was a program that we have been calling Invest in Equities, where we've been specifically looking at addressing the toxic language that often comes up in council chambers around anti-Israel rhetoric. And we ran a roundtable in Newham last year, bringing together councillors from both in Manchester and in London, along with councillors from jointly run Arab-Israeli centres, councils in Israel. Exchanging good practice on community cohesion. That's had fantastic results, and we're looking at how we can build on that going forward, but equally taking into account the situation in Israel. We need to be careful about what we do and how we do it to make sure that we're not getting in the way of other activity that the board is undertaking. But yes, we acknowledge the good work that was done from Invest in Peace, and we want to continue it and look for new ways of achieving that. Amos, over to you. We should be able to hear you, but we can't. Can you start again? Amos, we can't hear you. I don't know what's your mic, I think, not ours. Still can't hear you.
Let's just give Amos a bit of time.
Okay.
I'm not sure
Amos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to a question from in the room, and I'll come back to you.
Okay, he's heard.
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis, Hampstead. Apologies for a third question today. Just want to inquire whether the board is going to, before the local elections, give advice to all members of the community, but especially deputies, to ensure that anybody thinking of endorsing or contacting the Muslim Council of Britain refrains from doing so, especially candidates. Could you reiterate what the board's policy is with regards to the MCB and the government's position? Thank you.
Okay, to be frank, I'm not quite sure what the connection is between the local elections and the MCB, but the government have a list of organisations that they do not engage with, of which the MCB is one of those organisations, and we follow their guidance on that. And so we don't engage at this point with the MCB. Okay, Amos, are you still there? Are you ready?
I hopefully am ready.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Happy days are here again. Amos Schonfield, Deputy for Masorti Judaism. And of course, I should start with a happy birthday to David, because just because it's not his report doesn't mean we can't send him wishes. I am really glad to hear the Honorary Officers united in condemnation of the far right, whether it is here on our shores, in Israel, or anywhere else around the world. I do want to focus on the far right here in the UK. It does seem like there is a spike that we haven't seen in a number of years. Hope Not Hate reported a 102% increase in anti-migrant far right activity. That includes the demonstrations at Knowlesley, the attack on the migrant centre there. That includes the terrorist attack in Dover late last year. That also includes multiple demonstrations here around the UK this weekend, including in Rotherham. And also beyond issues around migrants, there were far-right demonstrations that were ostensibly about traffic measures, about low traffic neighborhoods, where one person had a sign that one person was reported by a reporter saying that the Rothschilds control all governments. And he said, Ashkenazi Jews aren't like us. No one knows where they really come from. The answer is, of course, Hendon. But that's not the point. There is a very large spike in far-right activity, and that affects us regardless of whether we are the first sort of issue they're focusing on, or if it's about traffic measures and it's issues and we're an issue down the line. Far right activity will always threaten us as Jews. So what I would like is as an assurance from you, and that this issue will be on your to-do list this coming week, to look at the spike in far right activity and to speak out on it if necessary. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amos. I think you're sort of reinforcing a lot of what was in the CST's annual incidents report as well, and the comments that Nick Price made to us earlier. I agree with what you're saying. I have already mentioned the fact that the Open Anti-Semitism meeting on the 27th of February is specifically looking at terrorism from the far right. And so, yes, you have my assurance that we will be looking at it. Thank you. Johnny.
Johnny Weinberg, Jewish Action for Mental Health. Actually, not speaking about that, I also happen to be involved with the cohesion charity We Stand Together. You said you want to look at other ways of cohesion work. We undertake preventative work going into schools, youth groups, colleges, community groups, with a unique workshop pack, which hopefully, if you haven't seen it yet, go to the website, westandtogether.org.uk. Please get it. Be thrilled to meet with you to talk about how maybe we can extend that, looking to use it, because when we talk about intersectionality nowadays, looking across all those issues, the fact that we can support people from other backgrounds, whether that be about race, nationality, faith, sexual orientation, and so on, and vice versa. So I'd love to speak with you about that. You're always welcome to Manchester to do that, unless we can do it on Zoom.
Fantastic. Thanks, Johnny. We'll take that offline. I've got two online. I'm going to ask Simon Gordon if you would like to ask the question.
Afternoon, Amanda. What it appears to me from the earlier thing from the CPS is it's not the CPS are the problem, it's actually the police. And I don't know how we get the police to actually prosecute or obtain the relevant information so that the Crown Prosecution Services can actually deal with it. I know there are people in various links with the police, but I don't think it actually gets down to the grass level, to the people who actually do it, they just turn away. Is there any way that you know that we can actually kick their bottoms to do something?
I think the police would be delighted to know that we're here to, I think you said, hit their bottoms. I'm not sure that that's quite how I would approach it, but engaging with the police is certainly one way forward. There's been when we had our short break in the middle of the meeting, someone else picked up this issue with me directly. And it's certainly something that the division will look at, because the mechanisms are there. There are ways that anyone that wants to make a complaint to the police the information is out there. I'm just not sure it's in one place, and that we are doing the most that we can do to get that out to communities and to individuals. And so I absolutely will take what you're saying, Simon, and take it back to the division, and we'll look at how we can move that forward. Thank you. I'm now conscious of the fact that we're running very late and I'm not able to take any more questions. I can see that Denise Lester and David Grossman have both got questions, and Paul Hart have all got questions. Please, can you contact me offline? And I'm happy to pick that up, and we'll circulate any answers more widely as appropriate. Many thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you all honorary officers for your extensive reports. We've got until 1:28, so I suspect, and apologies, we may not have time for all of the new deputies speaker programme, and if we don't, we will continue next time. So the order that I have is Stuart Lanceman in person, Michael Apple on Zoom, Sam Jacobs and Phil Rosenberg in person. Can I be very apologetic if we don't have time for everybody? Okay, Sam, I'm told, is not here, so Stuart Lanceman, thank you. Welcome to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Didn't think I might run out of time then. I was a bit relieved. Anyway, Stuart Lanceman, Northwest Surrey Synagogue, better known as Weybridge Shaw. A while ago, if you would have told me I would be speaking here as a deputy, I would have been most amazed. I haven't really been involved in Jewish organisations particularly. I was probably too busy driving a cab around London for a living until I retired. I'm not even on the shul council at my shul. I am, however, shamus or ward on a Friday night. I'm also involved in our Holocaust Memorial Day, where local secondary schools come into our shul, and that's years 9 and 10. And we educate them about the evil of the Holocaust. Then we go into breakaway rooms, and we're more one-to-one, a closer relationship, and that seems to be very effective. I'm also involved with the shul's commemoration of Yom HaShoah, and along with my wife, we used to do an introduction to Judaism, where local primary school children would come in to learn about alternative religions or about Judaism. They were only young, and they were very interested in the Sefer Torah, in the Ark, and the Telesim, and especially trying to blow the shofar. I like to think that we educated the teachers as well, judging by the feedback we got. I also try and write in our magazine about, well, I call it the Deputies' Diary. So I try to tell our congregation what's going on, what we're trying to do at the Board of Deputies. Perhaps it was my involvement with the plight of the Uyghurs in China that brought me to the notice of the shul committee. Let me explain. I felt I couldn't be a bystander to something similar to what happened in 1930s Germany, and I felt the Uyghurs were beginning to be treated that way. So I instigated a campaign, speaking to the rabbi and the congregation. It's rather a spread out congregation. We wrote to all their MPs in their constituencies, and we also wrote to the Foreign Secretary, which I think was Dominic Raab at that time. And it ended up, it got a bit of a volition, and it ended up with questions being asked in the House. That seems to be coming to the limelight again, the problems with China. Another reason why this is rather a daunting prospect for me is that I'm taking over as a deputy of my shul from someone who was not only a knight of the realm, a top barrister and a prominent Tory backbencher. So when I expressed my doubts and concerns about this, spoke to someone at shul, they said, who could, step into those shoes, so you can only do your best. And that's what I intend to do. But then again, I may perhaps be more able than I think for this job, because after 44 years of driving a cab, I can tell you that in London, I was able to solve all the problems in the world with a punter in the back in about a 20-minute journey. So,
Thank you. Thank you for your humour. Right, we've got Michael Apple and then Phil Rosenberg, so I will probably forego my closing comments to try and get everybody on. Can we give a big welcome, please, to Michael on Zoom? Thank you.
Thank you, and Madam President, honorary officers, thank you very much. I represent Watford and District Synagogue, affiliated to the United Synagogue. We number about 300 families, though judging by the rushed and chopped liver available in local supermarkets, there must be many more Jews in the area. Like many, I came because of work, in my case, joining a general medical practice in 1980, and stayed thanks to attractive housing, excellent schools, and the attractions of a small, friendly community. I've had a variety of roles within the shul, from editing the magazine to currently schlapping tables for simchas. Along the way, and inevitably, I've become an unofficial second medical opinion, typically being consulted during a kiddush, when, to be honest, my attention is not so much on discussing a hernia than on nabbing the last fishbowl. Our membership on the whole is what you might call secular Jewish. That is, we share a cultural attachment to our Jewish heritage. It is an attachment more to Jewishness rather than Judaism, and must be typical of many, especially outside of the major Jewish centers. Our prayers are as likely to be for our beloved and ever optimistic football team rather than for personal redemption. How was I nominated to be deputy? Well, let's just say that my arm is almost completely recovered. Thank you for asking. Since becoming a deputy last year, my eyes have been opened to the world of board activity about which I had known little. I have been hugely impressed and rather awed by the range of activities, the depth and breadth of knowledge of deputies, and the care with which issues are considered. And as of course we have seen this morning, the passion with which quite rightly people approach issues of concern within the community. I try to report all this back and hopefully make it a little bit more likely that our members will tick the box when it comes to making contributions to the board. I cannot claim to offer any more expertise than that, and cannot claim to represent any special interest group to match the many other such groups already on the board. However, that has perhaps some value in itself, as it seems clear that now and in future, how to engage an increasingly secular Jewish population will be an important concern for community leaders. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, that's great. And can I welcome Phil Rosenberg? You will all remember Phil to the cheers, because Phil, of course, was our Director of Public Affairs, and we are very, very delighted to welcome you back as a deputy. So over to you.
Thank you, Maria. I'm conscious standing between Jews and their lunch is a bad idea, so I'll keep it brief. Phil Rosenberg, Bronsbury Park Synagogue. Madam President, deputies, many of you will know that I've been involved in the Board of Deputies for some 15 years as an under 35 observer, as a member of staff, but now I make my maiden speech for the first time as a full deputy. It's wonderful to be here. This week's Parashat Terumah speaks about how the children of Israel volunteered their time, their talents, and their resources to build the Mishkan, the traveling temple in the wilderness. And that's a pretty good image to describe the amazing community that I have the privilege of representing, Bronsbury Park, which after its heyday in the 60s and 70s had some years in the wilderness, but due to the incredible enthusiasm and determination of volunteers, rebuilt the community with an amazing rabbinic couple, Rabbi Baruch and Kezi Levine, recently rebuilt a beautiful new synagogue. It has its benefits from an Erev, a historic cemetery, 2 wonderful Jewish schools, and I would commend everyone to come and visit. It is a wonderful community. And that concept of volunteers giving their time, their talents, and their resources really is a good image for the Board of Deputies as well. And the reason I keep being drawn back here, over 300 of us from all over the country giving of our time, talent, and resources to represent our communities and to speak for the good of the UK Jewish community. Over my years at the board, I've seen the amazing things that we can do together, working together with many people here on the fight against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. We saw this week the amazing fruits of that important campaign, taking on enemies of Israel and Jewish people, getting Hamas and Hezbollah prescribed. And I'm glad to see the efforts on the IRGC too, fighting an altogether different kind of enemy in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, working across denominations with the government to make sure our community remains safe, and building bridges with Arab and Muslim majority countries' embassies to prefigure and then to build on the amazing Abraham Accords. But it's not just external advocacy that we've been doing together and we continue to do so well. It's also internal, the Commission on Racial Inclusivity in the Jewish community, making sure we're welcoming as we can be to all members of our community. The work we've done to make sure regional communities are more included, including with Sarah Radovan coming into post, and bringing the Haredi community more on board, bringing in our first Haredi deputy, my friend Shmuel Yosef Davidson, the first Haredi deputy in 50 years. And there's much to do. We've heard about all the challenges that remain for our community and the divisions that there are. But I think the thing that's really important about the Board of Deputies is that we can disagree, but disagree civilly, and using our amazing talents here, bring much more light than heat to conversations. Madam President, I've had the pleasure of working with you and the honorary officers, and I look forward to working with all of you, Michael and the amazing staff team and all deputies, to continue making this a fantastic advocate for our community. It's wonderful to be back.
Thank you. I think it's really good to end on a high. And as Phil said, I'm not going to also keep you from your lunch. So I want to thank you all for coming. It's really nice that we have so many of you in the room. Have a very good weekend. See you all soon. And We want to thank all the members of staff that have helped make this possible today, and of course our tech team. So thank you to the team, thank you all for coming. Thank you. Safe journey home.
Thank you very much.